Hi, welcome to the first edition of the T2X Commentary. This is David Regal, otherwise known as Rain.
And I'm Dave Johnson, otherwise known as Fett.
So we've been talking about getting together and doing some commentary over T2X for quite a long time now, and it looks like we're finally going to be able to do it. We finally got together in person after 7.5 years, and we got our video playthroughs of the entire T2X project, and we're ready to go.
Yeah. So mission 1, and we did want to talk about some of the reasons why we decided to do this. Obviously, there's still community interest.
Yeah, we hope so. We've learned that our project is still actually being downloaded like once or twice a day from some of our mirror sites, which is really pretty surprising and flattering. And we've gotten thousands of downloads over the years, a lot of forum posts, a lot of emails, just tons and tons of support. We had magazine support for a little while from PC Gamer and PC Zone, which is great. So hopefully there's enough interest where people will like downloading this and listening to it. Right. And of course, another reason is that there are other projects that are still under development right now. There's Hammerite Imperium, there's the Dark Mod, Circle of Stone and Shadow might be on hiatus, but we're hopefully we'll be able to see a little bit more of that. And just tons and tons of fan missions are still being made every day. There's hundreds of fan missions for the Thief games, and there's still more being made all the time, which is surprising for a series that's this old.
Right. Yeah, and we really wanted to kind of share some of what we feel like were our successes. You may disagree, but what we felt like were some of our successes with the project, but also some of the missteps and some of the things that, some of the obstacles, in hopes that it will be, at least inspirational, if not instructive, as well, to some of the other teams that have kind of come along here in the last few years and started developing these expansions.
Yeah, and hopefully also this might be able to live as a kind of living resume for us, because it's really difficult to get professional developers to actually play mods that you may have worked on in the past, or in some cases even look at games that you may have worked on in the past. So we hope that this exists kind of above and beyond after T2X, and that people can download this and play it more easily than they'd be able to install the mod and look at it and learn some of the things that we did and what we were about back in the day.
Well, I should talk about the inception of the game, I guess. Thief 2, of course, which the Thief franchise was developed by Looking Glass Studios, and Thief 2 shipped in March of 2000. And then, of course, Looking Glass Studios closed 2 months later in May of that year, which was really disheartening for kind of a blow for the community of Thief fans. We felt like Looking Glass was really a special game house, especially related to whatever else is being made now or was being made at the time. They were.
Yeah, they occupied really a pretty unique niche in the market, because there were a lot of other first-person action games and adventure games and so forth, but Looking Glass was able to really combine stealth and RPG-light elements and first-person action and kind of make a cohesive, interesting game with a really interesting fictional backstory. And there were no other studios that were really doing that at the time. The games like System Shock and Thief and the other games that they developed were completely unique. And so the community support for them was always extremely strong.
Well, and there was that was really I think the main reason that T2X ever came about was immediately the opinion of many of the fans, and especially the TTLG community, was that the story of Garrett was not finished. That Looking Glass had started this great story with this great character and this wonderful environment, but we were left with a cliffhanger kind of at the end of Chapter 2, Thief 2, the Metal Age, and so we wanted to finish that out. We thought if Looking Glass can't do it, then we have the tools, we have DrawMed, we have a big enough community that we can pull people together and do this and make Thief 3, which of course we learned very shortly after was going to be developed by Ironstorm.
Yeah, at the time we had no idea whether or not the Thief franchise was going to continue, so we wanted to get together and make sure that we were able to tell a story the best way that we knew how.
Right. And we started out actually wanting to bring some resolution to the whole thing with the Keepers and all that, but then obviously we knew we couldn't do that, because that would most likely be what Ironstorm would deal with in Thief 3, and of course they did. Dave Regal here worked on Thief 3 as well, worked for Ironstorm during the development Deadly Shadows. But basically, once we had assembled this team of people and everybody was really enthusiastic about doing something that would honor the legacy of Looking Glass, it didn't really matter to us that Thief 3 was going to be developed. We thought, well, we need to go ahead and do something, and we came upon this idea of doing a backstory, or I guess it would be called more of a side story, about this girl that comes to the city, and that things that happen to her and the events that take place in T2X would tie into Thief 2 and have some type of tangible impact on the story of Garrett, that would somehow support that. And so we tried to, without being too ham-fisted about it, tried to kind of tie that in as much as we could. And I think there are hints of that throughout. And obviously toward the end, we have a big, epic event of from Thief 2.
Thief 2 a little bit more directly. Yeah. So the first thing we had to do was really assemble everybody together. There was a lot of fans that were anxious to contribute on IRC and in the forums. And we really needed to decide not only what we were going to do, but also what the project leadership was, who the project leadership was going to be, what responsibilities were going to be, and how we were going to divide people into different departments, and really assemble a team that could realistically complete a project like this.
Right. And Avalon was really the guy that kind of came up with the plan to have these different teams and the coordination between them. And we had a graphics team and a plot team and an audio team. And of course, as time went on and different people left and new people came on, that changed, somewhat. And Dave, who really started out as the head of the development, the design team for the missions, ended up taking over a lot more responsibility and really being, kind of one of the heads of the project. And that's just what happens, in a community thing where people are dealing with real life. You have to just kind of go with it and do the best you can. And
if you've ever worked on a mod project before, you realize that you realistically use about 10% of the people who want to help.
Right.
There are tons of people who come on board and either don't have the skills or overestimate their skills or really overestimate their commitment in terms of what they want to do and how much time they want to spend. And it was really difficult in those early stages and actually throughout the project to really filter down into people who could really get the job done.
Yeah.
And so it was constantly a struggle to try to find dedicated people who are good enough to really pull off a high quality project.
Well, here we're looking at Mission 1. Of course, we have Kedar, I should say, being attacked, and talk about the story a little bit. One of the things that we decided early on there really was never any argument about the fact that the lead character here would be a female. We already had Garrett. We had the character from the COSAS series that Digital Nightfall, Dan is working on, and we really wanted something different. We wanted a female that came to the city innocent but left a changed person, and of course a story of revenge lends itself very well to that, even though it's a familiar story arc.
Yeah, we wanted to have a definite character arc where the female character would change over time, and we wanted to make sure it wasn't a male character with a female face. We wanted to make sure it wasn't a Lara Croft kind of character. We wanted someone who was really unique to the Thief universe who could help us tell that story in the most interesting way.
And that's really where Strange Blue, I think we had two of the girls that were on the plot team, I should say ladies, that were on the plot team, Valletta, V Equinox, known as V Equinox, and then also Strange Blue. We really relied heavily on them of, what would a woman do in this situation? I mean, how would she react to this? And Strange Blue especially, but also Valletta, I think were really instrumental in trying to flesh out who Zaya was and what she was going to do and how she would react to being manipulated by Malik, which was something, there's some people that have kind of complained that or mentioned that, it's obvious that Malik is evil and we can see that he's using her. And we it was never our intention to hide that or to obscure that. We wanted it to be pretty obvious to the player. And Valletta has mentioned, again, as we've come upon doing this commentary, she said, it was never our intention for it to be a surprise that Malik was a bad guy. What we wanted to explore was how Zaya would react to the situation that she's thrust into here by being basically stranded in the city without a boat, doesn't know anyone, and here's this guy that takes her in. She knows he's not all there, and something's wrong with him, but it's all she has. And so how does she then deal with the situation that she's presented with?
Yeah, the motif of the unwitting pawn is really one of my favorite aspects, I think, of the Thief 1 story, and it's something that we kind of harken back to a little bit when we were developing the Thief 2 or Thief 2X plotline.
Yeah. Well, and it's something, again, you got a lot of people contributing to the story, and typically when that happens, you're gonna fall back on things that are familiar to you. It's going to be a Lord of the Rings plot line, or it's going to be a Star Wars plot line, or it's going to be something that is familiar. If you've got one guy sitting down to write the story, he may be able to come up with something that's spectacular and totally different from anything we've ever seen before. But when you've got a community project that's open to anyone who wants to contribute, you're just by nature going to tend to gravitate toward things that are familiar and comfortable. And so
although the story can end up stronger for that when you get a lot of creative ideas coming in from multiple different people. But it's interesting you brought that up, because one of the things that we've talked about is at the very beginning of the project, we really wanted to allow as many people in as possible, to really have as many contributors from the community as possible. And over time, we really had to make decisions about assigning the best people for any given job, and really filtering the ideas down. And I think specifically with regards to story, I think that was largely the result of Strange Blue and you and some of the other strong plot guys being able to take a whole bunch of different ideas and then kind of decide the overall direction for the story, which ideas were good, which ones we could use, and which ones we couldn't.
Right. Well, and also I think one of the things that comes out of one of the big things I learned about just dealing with people in a project like this is when it is a community project, it's not just something that's your baby and you're not controlling every aspect of it. There's a real balance. There's a kind of a tension and a balance there between trying to produce something that is commercially viable, that a lot of people can play and identify with, and also satisfying, the fact that it is a community project, that you're not just going to reject ideas out of hand, that you're going to be open to all these different things, like you say, try to meld them into a singular vision. And so, whereas, if I had written this by myself, or Dave had designed all the missions himself, it would probably look a lot different than it does. And I like what we ended up with, but when it's a community project, you've got so many ideas going into it, and it's just a real balancing act, kind of to make everything go in a single direction and be coherent and still incorporate all those ideas,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and certain disciplines lend themselves better to open community support than others. I think one of the things we try to do is bring on a lot of artists and a lot of sound designers, concept guys and so forth, and we could basically choose what we liked and reject or redo the things that we didn't. When it came to other disciplines like mission design, for example, we learned very quickly that we needed people who were competent from the very start, and we needed to be very careful about the people that we brought on board to make sure we had the highest quality product possible.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and as much as you would like to think of a project like this as being a democracy and 100 different people having equal say, and it just doesn't happen. You end up really with what I like to think of as a benevolent dictatorship. Where you've got 2 or 3 guys that really have taken all these ideas that everybody has brought, and they've put them in the mixing bowl and come up with the recipe and said this is what we're going to do, and then they have to then impart that vision back to the rest of the team and say, well, this is what we're doing. This is what was decided at the beginning. And unless there's a real good reason to change it, we need to stick with what was decided.
I mean, at the very beginning, none of us had professional development experience at that point. So a lot of the decisions that we made were based on instinct, but I think a lot of them ended up being the right thing. Like, one of the things that we knew right away was that we needed to have different disciplines and different leads of different departments, and make sure that we were getting people who had specialized skills to develop different aspects. Like, we had a specialized plot team, we had people who only did certain aspects of art or sounds, and we certainly had a mission design team that was all experienced designers for the most part.
Well, speaking of that, in this mission that we're looking at right now, Mission 1, we had Mad God actually did the original design for this, and he was I was a big fan of his from his events in High Rock.
Yeah.
mission.
It's funny, but a lot of the designers that we got tended naturally to gravitate towards their strengths. And Mad God was known for two missions way back in the early days of Thief 1. He did the Mages area, which was an underground, very trap-heavy, like very difficult, very interesting kind of mission, and then Events in High Rock, which was an open city mission. And this map right here, Mission 1, Unexpected Shelter, was a combination basically of those two things. It started out as an open city and then ended up being an underground mansion with traps. And so he was really the natural choice for it.
Well, and the city was very, very open at the beginning. I didn't. You saw this, but I didn't see this till it was further along. But you said in the beginning it was a really open city section. We had to. When Duncan got hold of it, he really had to kind of streamline things and get us into the story and get us to the mansion pretty quickly.
Yeah, like a lot of the missions in T2X, this went through several revisions. The mansion actually is largely unchanged, but the city was changed a lot. In the very beginning, it was a little bit more open-ended. There wasn't an area really that was enclosed where you met Kadar. The chase began a lot earlier and was a lot more confusing. It just had miscellaneous design problems that we needed to solve before we shipped the map. And Mad God worked on this mission for about 2 years or 2.5 years or so, and then eventually had to leave. He left for real life reasons and for a few disagreements that we had about the design direction for the map. But fortunately, Duncan was able to take it over, and he really did a terrific job in finishing it up and putting all the necessary polish on the scripted events.
Yeah. And I remember that one of the big things was trying to figure out how to get the conversation to work at the beginning with Kadar. I know Duncan struggled with several things. That was one of them. And it was suggested, really insisted, I think early in the plot meetings, that Zaya have a face-to-face meeting with Kadar in the mission, not relegate that to a cutscene, because we had to, and I think this is one of the things maybe we didn't do as well as I would have liked to, but we wanted to develop that rapport and that relationship between Zaya and Kadar early, and we had the first third of a mission to do it in, so it was a difficult thing to do that. But one of the things that I think Strange Blue and Valletta as well were very instrumental and was encouraging us to move to not do that in a cutscene, but really have that happen in game, which was just gave Duncan fits, I think, trying to get that conversation to work in that closed space, and then having her follow him through the city with the gates opening and closing at the right times, and not leaving the player behind and not letting her get too far ahead. And, he really had to go through a lot of headache to get all that to work, but I think it works beautifully, when we see the finished product.
Yeah, there's a lot of polish on it. Like Kadar can't get too far ahead. The gates are closed in front of you, so you can't leave him behind. If you happen to get too far away from him, he'll stop and look back and call out to you until you get close to him again. So there's a lot of things that we wanted to do to make sure that experience was pretty smooth, and he did a good job scripting that.
Well, another interesting thing that happened, though, is we get to the mansion and all of a sudden we're wondering, why don't the smugglers follow her into the mansion? So that comes then back to the plot team. Hey, we don't want the smugglers chasing her through the mansion. You got to figure out why they won't go in there. Well, obviously it's haunted. So we had that to work with. But then, we said, well, they're scared and they're going to stop outside the front gate. So then he had to figure out a way to make sure that, they wouldn't come through the gates, but also so the player couldn't get back out. We had to close the doors. And I think in the original, there was a window that you could break and get back outside. And we fixed that in the patch. And
we had a lot of conversations about that, a lot of late night conversations about just technical problems with keeping the player in there, and about making sure the smugglers always ended up in the right spot. And I think we ended up solving most of them. I mean, there were little things with the chase too, like in the very beginning, Kadar wasn't bludgeoned with a club; he was hit with an arrow, and the AI actually proved to be just slightly too unreliable.
Kind of like the Star Wars stormtroopers. You didn't know if they were actually going to hit the target or not.
So we ended up changing the story a little bit and having Kadar hit with a club instead. That was Duncan's idea, and we just had to find a solution to all those different problems. And one of the other things about the earliest version of the map too is that the second half of the city, which is where you're being chased by the smugglers, used to be really pretty open-ended. And Mad God was originally pretty adamant that he wanted the player to have to go through and really find the mansion and have the chase be a little bit longer. But we really found when we started to playtest that it really wasn't fun, that it was too easy to get hung up or trapped in a corner, and that players are getting confused. And so what we did was basically we made it we had Duncan cut it down and make it a lot more streamlined just for that short section, and it ended up playing a lot better.
Well, there's also the light gem issue, where people, the light gem doesn't work. Well, she's not a thief. She doesn't know how to sneak. So the light gem that was a little bit of a confusing thing for some people too.
Yeah, we wanted to keep this very introductory though. So.
Yeah, and introduce the characters, kind of establish that she's stranded and all those kind of things. So here she meets Moloch, and we go to the cut scene where it's obvious to us he's a bad guy, but maybe not so much to her at the beginning anyway.
And again, it was important to give all these characters a presence early on. So when Duncan originally took over the map was actually complete. Matt Gott had built it all the way from start to finish, and most of the scripted events were in terms of actually being there and being present. But the problem was the map wasn't completely fun yet. It wasn't completely polished yet. And so we had a lot of discussions near the start about the things that we needed to do in order to bring the map up to shippable quality. And the very first thing that we wanted to do was to redo the starting area, because the starting area was really pretty simple at the start, and we both felt that it needed to be one of the most attractive areas in the game. It's the first thing that the player sees, right. So it needed to be a confined little courtyard where you could see Zea's ship and see the dragon statue that she brought on board that we'll talk a little bit about in Mission 2. And it also needed an area where Zea could interact with Kadar and could meet with Kadar in kind of a confined space, so we could force the player into this little, this small area where she couldn't get out, so that conversation could take place. After that, the rest of the city needed to be shorn up a little bit. The chase needed to be a little bit more linear, like we talked about. Aesthetically, by that point, but in the project, we had some new art resources and textures that needed to be applied. There were lightning effects that we wanted to put in. And also one of the things that we wanted to do was to, instead of having all the buildings really close by and kind of enclosing the player, we wanted to open things up and kind of give the player a glimpse of the city beyond the buildings that they could immediately see. So Duncan put in like a lot of fences and a lot of walls where you could kind of see like a more expansive cityscape beyond that, like some rooftops and towers, and that really elevated the atmosphere and the aesthetic a whole bunch. And then the mansion, of course, was left mostly intact. A lot of the puzzles were there, but he polished up a few events here and there, and we ultimately got it to a really good, highly playable state, I think.
Yeah. And I should probably also mention, this is a good place to mention our voice actors. Wynn, of course, did a wonderful job with Zea, which couldn't have been more pleased. And the guy that's playing Moloch is actually a friend of mine named Chris Snyder, who has never played Thief, knows nothing about the Thief universe, but just I felt like had the quality we needed for Malick's voice, and he jumped right in and took over the role, and I think really lended a lot of personality to the character. It's kind of a menace to his voice, which I liked.